It is my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JPMorgan, to the Fuqua School of Business. And Mr. Dimon has been very gracious with his time to Fuqua. This is the third year in a row that he's spoken to Fuqua, and we're very grateful to have you here again. Now, Mr. Dimon has a very successful career in the financial service industry and has held senior executive positions in a number of leading U.S. companies. Such companies include Smith Barney, Citigroup, and Travelers before heading to turnaround at Bank One. Now, after JPMorgan's merger with Bank One in 2004, Mr. Dimon assumed the role of President and Chief Operating Officer before being promoted to CEO of January 1st of this year. Now, Mr. Dimon also serves on a number of boards of nonprofit organizations, including the United Negro College Fund and Harvard Business School. Now, the format of the presentation today will be a fireside chat with Mr. Dimon and Deputy Dean Will Mitchell. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Jamie Dimon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
You're coming through. Jamie, thank you so much for coming, and let me add my welcome to Scott's. I mean, it's great having you here. You've been a highly effective leader within financial services. You're a great friend to Fuqua, a great friend to Duke. You've contributed your daughter for 4 years, which I think is a brave thing to do.
Right. And maybe
Julie,
are you
here? Is your daughter here with you tonight?
She's going to be any second. She just dropped me off.
Hurrah. I was thinking about when I was thinking about what we might want to talk about tonight, I thought we could, I have some questions. I know I would like to hear some thoughts from you, and I thought we would turn it over to my wonderful students to ask even better questions and get your insights. And I thought, when I was thinking about the questions, I thought I would go back a little bit in time to when you took over Bank One and then rolled up into JPMorgan Chase. And in particular, I guess I'm interested in two aspects of your leadership, and I'd like to go on to some of the strategic issues you face. But before we do that, I'd like to think about a bit about your leadership. And let me first ask sort of what you've learned, who you've learned from as a leader, and in turn, what aspects of your leadership style do you think are particular strengths? And on the other side, none of us are perfect as leaders. I'd be interested around what aspects you think of your leadership style create challenges.
Right. So first of all, I want to apologize for being late. I think it's a terrible thing. So I always tell people it should never happen, so I apologize. I think the first question, who have you learned from? I've learned from a lot of people. And you kind of learn by watching. You learn from your parents. You learn from your teachers. You learn from friends. I worked for a guy called Sandy Weil for a long time. He wasn't the mentoring type. It was kind of sink or swim. But you learn by watching and doing and just being around, smart, tough people. And I learned a lot from, but like a guy called Bob Lipp, who was my partner for years, who probably was a fabulous manager. Sandy Weil was not a fabulous manager, but Bob was disciplined, smart, went through all the numbers, always knew exactly what was going on around the company. I learned a lot from Bill Harrison, who's still the chairman of JPMorgan. Yeah. My wife used to come back and say, "My God, can't you be a little more like Bill?" I mean, I said, "What do you mean?" But Bill is a gentleman. He always is very mature in how he deals with things. He's certainly politer than I am when it comes to something. So I've kind of learned from all those people and from just reading history.
That's neat. When you've looked at history, who has struck you in particular as being
Abe Lincoln would be one. You look at the trials and tribulations he went through, and he always maintained his calm, fabulous sense of humor. Nelson Mandela. I mean, it still amazes me that someone could spend 27 years in jail and get out and be magnanimous to the people who jailed him. And had he not done that, maybe South Africa would have ended up in a civil war as opposed to, a free country today and had a peaceful transition. So, and there are lots of other historical figures I put in the same category. But you asked about strengths, weaknesses. I'll tell you, there are common weaknesses. The weaknesses you have, first of all, I have a temper. And I would tell you it's a terrible thing to have. In fact, wherever I go, sometimes...
I see your daughter laughing.
Yeah. That's my daughter. Yeah. Yeah, I have a temper, and it's actually a terrible thing. And it took me, until I was about 45 to realize how destructive it can be. And it's never justified. Okay, I actually look at Bill Harrison, he would never do it. And a lot of people always say to me, well, that was a well-aimed anger. You know, it never was. It was just a welling up of anger over something. Sometimes you were right to be angry, but you end up doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing. You have to recorrect it all the time. It takes your eye off the ball. And so now if I feel it welling up in me, I try. I don't always succeed. You know, to say, and I actually the other day I said to someone, I feel myself getting really pissed off. I don't know why, but it's coming to me. So I'm going to leave the room, and when I figure out, I'm going to come back and tell you why. And I was very proud of myself. So
I love it. I love it.
So.
Let me follow up on the notion of leadership, and in particular, you've been very successful as a leader of change. And this is something that all of us are going to be faced with and all of us need to do. And I think of, in particular, you know, taking over Bank One at a time when you took over a bank that had been very successful, had a history of spectacular success, in fact, and was going through a very difficult time with the struggles with the acquisitions of First USA, struggles with integrating First Chicago MBD. And you took over a bank that was struggling somewhat, in reality turned it around, made very strong profits within a couple of years, right. And then stepped into a new role where again you were taking on a leadership of change with JPMorgan Chase, where you'd put before you came in, they put together two banks. After you came in, you added another 50%. I think if I've got it right, the bank in 5 years went through almost 3 times asset growth and more than 2 times employee growth. Yeah. So there's two major change efforts. That in one case you clearly succeeded, in the other case you're clearly on the path to success. And I'd be very interested in hearing more from you about sort of your approach to leading change initiatives.
Right. So first of all, I think there are many types of good leaders, you know, and it's not whether you're a good speaker or whether you whether you can rally the troops or a great salesman or a great analyst. It's really this whole, I think it takes a lot of different types of skills, which everyone has in various ways. You know, some people sometimes say, is it your EQ or IQ? You know, and I would tell you, it's not IQ. You know, you could be most people could be a very successful leader. There is a lot of EQ about, you know, social skills and ability to get along with people and organize. It's not whether you're brilliant, it's whether you actually have clarity of thought. Can you decompose problems? Can you understand them and put them back together in a relevant way? I think it's your passion. You know, it's how much do you want to be good, you know? So it's not EQ or IQ, it's your passion, it's your character, it's your work ethic. You know, do you actually have the work ethic that can drive something? Bank One was much tougher than JPMorgan. I mean, not even close. Because at Bank One, when I walked into a boardroom. There was 22 board members. I knew 6 of them. They had hired me. I'd known that there was a big debate about who to hire. Some of them wanted the guy who had been there for a long time, because it was a steady pair of hands type thing, and a decent guy. You know, I shook the hands of the people. I told them, I'm going to do the best I can, and hopefully when I come back to them, and I walked downstairs, I said to someone, you know, I need a secretary, I need an office, to kind of meet the executive team. I hadn't met anyone. And, you know, it was one lonely thing, particularly that first, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 months. And, you know, what I do is basically just forget any preconceptions you have. Just dig into the people, the issues. Everyone I met, what do you do? How do you do it? Send me the stuff you read. How do you run your business? I was always taking people out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, searching out the good people in the company. And there's a lot, if you're ever in a situation like that, there's a lot of pressure, like to not do anything. The company's fragile, so don't pressure the management team. You know, the board is fragile, so don't be careful with the board. You know, don't be, wherever you go, people want you to make commitments. Like the first day, someone said to me, you know, we had this press conference. They said, well, Mr. Dimon, you're going to reaffirm the forecast of the company. And the acting CEO, who is no longer the CEO, said, absolutely. They said, what about you, Mr. Dimon? I said, absolutely not. I said, I don't know. When I know something, I'll let you know. And you know, the biggest bullshit, folks, they've been practicing this for so long, they are really good at it. And they're the ones who line up at your door. This is how it's going, to help you get it done. You got to like Joe, and you know, this is the core person, but you're often not. So there's a lot of deception going on in the place, and the company is doing terrible. You like all of a sudden fragile management, you know, and you have to decide. They said to me, don't cut the charities. We were giving away a lot of money. And United Way came to see me and said, you know, this is a good chance for you to prove yourself to Chicago, that you're charitable. You know, and by the way, if you don't kind of increase the giving, you know, it can make your name not so good in Chicago. And basically, once I figured out what I had to do, I told people it's the other way around. Everyone's going to give. It's like everyone's going to cut, everyone's going to give, every charity, every person, every department, every executive, so that I told United Way, excuse me, this is about my reputation. I said, I'm about to lay off 10,000 people. I'm cutting your contribution. And if you insult this company or me, you'll never get a contribution again. I told the executive management people, I took away their cars, their clubs, their SERPs, their 401k matches. I took away their matching gift programs, the financial planning, and they weren't that happy. And I met with them in rooms like this. I said, because folks, those are entitlements. We're going to lay off people. You're in good shape. They aren't. And we, collectively, are to blame. And I want you to stand forward and be proud that you're cutting your stuff first. And some people get it and some don't. I was completely honest with the board. And in fact, I cut the board. I cut the board comp. And once I started explaining to them why, you know what they said? Absolutely, you should cut us too. No, but I'm saying, people will stand up and say, you know what, you're right, if we want to save this company, and you got to really be kind of forceful and do it, because a lot of people, you're like a deer in the headlights, and the forces want to stop you from doing anything. We had multiple systems and platforms, and they said, don't touch that because customer service will get worse. I said, folks, we're going to consolidate all of them. Hired 3,000 engineers and programmers to do it. And then you start to have some successes. But what I did not do is spend a lot of time trying to improve morale other than talking to people and telling the truth. So that, I said, look, the game here isn't to me to convince you everything's going to be okay. We have to work hard to make it okay. This is hard work, and we're going to do the work. And morale will get better. People do terrible things in the name of morale. They don't touch any of those perks. They don't touch anything. They compromise every decision, and you end up doing a lot of the wrong stuff.
Makes sense. So I want to come to taking over the leadership reins at JPMorgan Chase. And let me first say, the number of times that the leader of the target becomes the CEO of the buyer can be counted on the fingers of one hand in any given year, maybe the fingers of one finger. This is a very rare occasion. So you're coming in, the JPMorgan folks are looking at you and say, wait a minute, we bought you, how come you're leading us?
Yeah, I do get a lot of that, yes. And worse than that, they pay a premium.
Right. And we're paying a premium for a firm that was struggling, so what on earth are we paying for?
Yeah, so JPMorgan was the bigger company. And I were negotiating. He was going to be my boss, but I have to negotiate with them. And they're pretty tense times, and he kept on saying merge of equals, merge of equals, merge of equals. Yeah, right. And usually a merge of equals is, you share the name, you share the, so it could be Bank One or JPMorgan Chase. Someone's chairman and someone's CEO. It's someone's city. I said, Bill, where's the merge of equals in this? It's going to be called JPMorgan Chase. It's going to be in New York. You're going to be the chairman and CEO. That's not a merge of equals. So you got to pay a premium. And but we always knew. I mean, part of the deal was that I'd become CEO in 2 years. It was part of the contract. And both he wanted that, their board wanted it, and my board insisted on it. Because, and Bill would say, the most important thing for CEO is to make sure your success is in place. He probably would have preferred to have stayed longer, but he said, you know what, if I don't get this guy, someone else will, Bank want to do something different, and this is what we want to do. Right. So, and I think, again, a testament to him and a lot of other people in the company, you didn't say anything about this deal. Like, in other deals with John Reed and Sandy Weil and John Mack and Phil Purcell and, at Credit Suisse, first one, major blow-ups and public. Nothing. Just systematic, things getting fixed, leadership change taking place, no upheaval. Right.
I want to think a little bit about the strategy at JPMorgan Chase. I mean, you've got, and let me sort of phrase this in terms of how you balance what I'll call exploitation and exploration, where exploitation is essentially you've got this very diversified financial services business. If I counted right, you're in 17 countries, 17 states, 50 countries, you're constantly adding things, constantly paring things away. So there's a real challenge just to make sure that the stuff you've got works well. And at the same time, you're constantly moving. You're moving into China, you're moving elsewhere in Asia, so you're constantly exploring new spaces. And I'm very curious about how you as a strategist find a way for you and for the rest of the company, for your team and the other folks in the company to balance this need to make sure things work well, and at the same time, look for new opportunities.
Right. So the first thing is, I think when you get to a company like JPMorgan Chase, is set the organization up right. I call it like organizational architecture. Like, how do you set it up? So we have 6 businesses, and they all actually deeply relate to each other, which I won't go into really, but if you think about it, 5 of our businesses, everything but the global investment bank, the average regional bank does. They do credit card, debit card, retail, middle market, cash management, private banking and stuff like that. And the global investment bank, they even try to do some of that, maybe a few little derivatives, a little bond underwriting, a little advice, but obviously they can't compete with the very large global investment banks. And the management team, and I just saw Steve Black, who's the head of the CEO of the investment bank, walk in. We get together once a month, spend the better part of a day in dinner, and weekly, but usually much shorter. And a lot of that stuff is done together. And the first thing we had to do was run the place better. So if you had looked at JPMorgan Chase / Bank One, you would have said, hey folks, you weren't really performing up to snuff. And you don't, so your margins are too low, your return on capital are too low, we've disappointed the marketplace, we had a lot of issues and problems, we had multiple systems again. So the first thing was to execute well. Get the company performing well. That creates all the other options. So I never took my eye off of that. Let's run the business better. Our costs were too high, we were too bureaucratic, but not one decision is like me sitting in some tower somewhere saying, we're going to do this. It's that group of 12 or 15 make those decisions. Every one of them is involved in, and very rarely is it like somehow I have to make a decision and that's the divided one. Usually the answer is waiting to be found. And if you also looked at JPMorgan Chase at each business, so take the global investment bank, these actually were world-class businesses that were underperforming, as opposed to businesses that had bad strategic position. And so if you looked at it and kind of did like a heat map, you would have said, you've kind of got everything, but why aren't you better in mortgages? You never built the energy business, you should be better in France than this, you should be doing more mortgages or MPLs in Germany, you need to expand your footprint in China, but that's, you're talking about, that's just tactical, that's not strategic. Right. But the value of those tactical things, billions of dollars of profit. So again, it's the first thing you should do. So strategically, get the tactical stuff. I say a lot of this wasn't just low-hanging fruit, it was fruit on the ground. It was just waiting there to be picked up. Right. And so the biggest strategic issues, so like a lot of us are going to Asia and the Middle East next week, or the week after next week, and we're going to go through country-by-country reviews. Are we being aggressive enough in India, China, Korea, Japan, as a company level? And we're going to do that at the company level, not just the business level. And my guess is out of that, we'll probably have a slightly more aggressive plan. We do have one big strategic issue, gap. So look at the United States, we're in all 50 states, but retail we're in 20, but we have 100 million credit card holders. But here it's geographic, kind of simple stuff. And because we've got management teams and systems in place, the next deal we do in the United States regionally, we'll be able to consolidate everything in 9 months. We can almost consolidate it the day we close. Costs drop instantly, the place will be better run, and the new company gets better systems, better products, and better services. And that goes something for the client. But the biggest strategic gap is consumer overseas. And that is a much more complicated thing since we don't have any. So if you said, compared to other people, we're nowhere, and Citi's been doing it for 100 years. HSBC's been doing it for 100 years. And so we've got to figure out how we're going to go about it our way. Right.
I mean, and in some sense takes me to the second part of strategy. I mean, because if you think of strategy, part of it is making sure you execute flawlessly and just drive costs down, take advantage of what you've got. The other piece is to differentiate, to find ways to be different than your competitors. And right now, you've pulled the company back up so you're reasonably close to the frontier of the industry, but you're still lagging it slightly.
We are, yes.
What thoughts do you have about differentiation, what places you can go that will allow you to create extra value?
It reminds us about leadership, too. One of the most important things is that you are very honest about stuff, that you actually acknowledge where you are. So, a lot of these companies I've been at, and I'm not just talking about Bank One or JPMorgan Chase, but companies we had acquired before, they didn't say we're doing terribly. So, if you're all running the business, and we're meeting one day, and I'm talking about how great we're doing, and we're doing terribly, how are we going to actually fix it? We're not even acknowledging the shortcomings. So it's to acknowledge it. And the other thing is this enormous press focus on cost cutting. Honestly, it is a sideshow. So when I get to JPMorgan Chase, some people didn't know me said, well, should we focus on costs or revenues? And it's kind of a gambit. It doesn't really matter. I call it waste cutting. We had 10 million vacant square feet. We had data centers in major New York cities, in major buildings in downtown cities. We had twice as many staff people as we needed in certain areas. We were so bureaucratic, it took literally 90 days to do something we should have done in 5. And that stifles an organization. It cripples it. It's a disease. And the more important part is when we have, I call them business reviews, is that what are the things, and it's not revenues, it's everything. better client service, better products? Where are you adding bankers? Are you recruiting the right people? Are you building the systems? We're spending $1.5 billion in data centers. Right. We're spending $500 million more in marketing. We insist on where are the investments. So Steve Black, who walked in here, who runs the investment bank, went through yesterday with us, where they're going to spend $1 billion more investing. Across the whole, it's around the world, and it's from systems, because in certain categories, systems are going to differentiate you. In other areas, it's kind of R&D into things like, you may not know this, but the pension world is changing. Accounting is changing, what companies are going to do with it, and therefore we're putting R&D into what can we do kind of on a derivative basis to help companies manage their pension liabilities better. So there's a lot of R&D in some of these businesses. Absolutely. And that'll differentiate you.
Let me ask you something that ties together strategy and leadership. And that's, you've talked a lot about the initiatives, you've talked a lot about places you can go, things you can do, and you've said very accurately that you can't do it all yourself and you can't understand it all yourself. You've got to, in a real sense, trust the folks you work with. How do you learn who to trust? How do you, in terms of their judgment and their...
It's a great question, and it's probably one of the most important. First of all, like I said before, you go to a lot of these companies and people, they don't want anything moved. They like it the way it is. And you're an interloper, and the way you learn to trust, I call it breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's at the bar, it's getting to know people. And honestly, I tell people there's a book in every one of you. So I don't even have to meet you, okay? So I can I can talk to your peers, I can talk to your students, I can talk to your friends. I'll know a lot more about you than you think.
Probably more than I do.
Well, yeah, how hard you work, how much other people trust you, whether people say, fabulous. And some people inside a company, they are the glue. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily the loudest, but they are the heart and soul of a place, and you can find them, and you seek them out. I have to earn people's trust. So I don't walk in there like, well, you have to trust me because I'm the boss, because I know you're not going to. But if you see that I do what I say, and I say what I do, and if you give me a confidence, it's not violated, that you start to trust me, and you can speak openly and freely, and vice versa, and you develop and build trust. And like I said, a lot of it does not happen at business meetings. It happens, on one-to-ones and at dinners and things like that.
Let me ask one last question, and I want to turn this over to the folks. And that's really, let me sort of transition to thinking about the folks here, is what advice you have for MBA students and others who are both as they're looking for their next job, and equally as they're looking out at the rest of their careers and thinking about where they want to go. Yeah,
so I'll try to give you the best I can. Number one, you're really making a couple of decisions when you join a company, okay? And one is the people you're going to work for directly. Or three decisions: the people you work for directly, the actual job itself, and the company. And they're all kind of really important. So I would look and weigh and measure all of them a little bit. Because, very often, I remember graduating business school, I remember people sitting around, and back then when you graduate business school, I think people were getting like $38,000 a year. People would say, well, I'm getting 42 over here, and I don't like the company as well, but 42, it's a lot more than 38. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's the irrelevant fact. And what's relevant, if you really like the people, because if you have kind of a bond, they're going to take care of you, challenge you. You kind of already hit it off. The job is important, but I would tell you in that one, you don't really know what you like yet. Most of my friends who graduated, you think you like sales and you kind of like trading. You think you like marketing, you kind of like, running something. You think you like, and you're going to try a lot of those. So go with your instinct, but you should assume that you're going to try a few, and you can see what other people are doing, and it may look more attractive to you, and your needs change. You get married, you have kids, you may not want to travel as much, so the job itself will change, and therefore the company also becomes important, because a good company will give you other choices. So, if I hope at JPMorgan Chase, if we think you're great, and you say, you know what, I'd like to go live in Chicago for a couple of years, or try my hand, I've been in investment banking, but I'd like to, can I actually run one of those business units you have one day? And we should say, yeah, we should present you with other opportunities in life that would be great for you, whether it's living around the world, whether it's inside the investment bank, or it's inside other businesses.
Okay, good stuff. Let me ask for folks here what questions you have. Take advantage of the opportunity to speak with Jamie. And I'll stand up and moderate. Go ahead.
I have a question. In terms of growth in the institutional marketplace for JPMorgan, different firms in the street are doing different things. Goldman Sachs is doing great with their prop trading. Stanley O'Neill, Merrill Lynch is putting a lot into commodities. Morgan Stanley's working on the hedge fund business. what do you see for the big drivers? I know a lot of it's how much risk you're going to take, but what do you see driving the institutional business going forward?
Yeah, so when you talk about some of those things, again, I know what all the competition is doing. So we're already big in hedge funds. We already have a fairly large prop trading group and things like that, and we've also built energy and commodities. And so I actually focus more on building us. So if you actually look at our global businesses, it's 150 trading desks around the world. Now we lump them up into credit rates, and at credit you might say, bond and derivatives and high yield and high grade and loan, and you may try that in 5 different markets around the world, but it's 150. And in each one, you got to have the right systems, the right products, the right people, and the right order flow and the right ability to manage it. So we should have built out those things. So we're building energy, we're building mortgages, we're building pension, we're building MPLs. And to me, risk, when you look at risk, it's not just say we want to take risk, you want to get paid for the risk you take. You can take a lot of risk and not get paid, and so obviously, Goldman's done a great job at that. But I've never said to people, don't take risk. We are doing deals is a risk taking. The risk decisions they're large and risky, but if you have the right people, you shouldn't build a business. So we're building it our way, and some people do similar stuff and some don't, but we don't spend that much time worrying about it. I always assume the competition is going to be tough. Always. It's like I've never been in a business. People, you go to these business reviews and people say, well, our margins are shrinking and the competition's tough and margins are shrinking. I hate to tell you, I don't think I've ever been at a business meeting where someone said, you know what, my margins are expanding, the competition seems to be going away. That's what capitalism is. The competition's coming after you regardless of, and there's always someone good. So, I don't say, well, if they falter, that's good for us because there's someone else right behind them. And I'd always say, let's assume the good competition in that business.
Yeah, maybe Nucor in the steel industry a few years ago, and when it was only competing against U.S. Steel.
That's correct.
Or Toyota when it was only competing against a few companies that we know only too well.
That's correct.
Yeah. Other thoughts, questions?
My question is about infrastructure finance. Would you please comment on the outlook for that for the next 5 to 10 years?
The what?
The infrastructure finance.
Oh.
Mark Weiser leads the group.
Yeah, it's a huge market. Infrastructure finance, as you see, Chicago has a toll road, and they just sold it for $1.8 billion. Indiana toll road, I think by the time they finish it, it could be $20 billion. So people selling airports, they're selling roads, they're selling, anything that municipalities, governments own, they can actually sell and turn it into a business. So what it is, it's you advise on it, you finance it, you manage it, and so we're gearing up inside kind of public finance. We're staffing up to have an infrastructure group, and they're going to go after that marketplace. And we've been involved in some, and some people, this Macquarie Bank in Australia has probably done the best job of all. They start early, they start in Australia, but they've expanded around the world. I think they bought the Chicago Tollway, an Australian bank. So you look at how the world globalized, Australian banks are buying, Chicago roads, and, Chicago companies are buying Australian banks, and but I think people estimate it's going to be $2 trillion in total. My guess is that might be light.
Other thoughts?
There's one over there.
Great.
It seems starting in the 90s that M&A advisory started changing from being a relationship business to a transactional type business. Can you comment on how that's affected the way you operate?
I think it's still both. So most corporations, when they want help on M&A, and that's so close to the heart of the company, they will go to their top advisor, someone they know and someone they trust. They also expect you to execute it well. The actual details and teams and legal and compliance and due diligence. And so whether you're selling a division or the company or buying a division of the company, it's still pretty much both. So if you look at who people actually go to in deals, and it changes over time, but one of the reasons we feel great about our investment bank is M&A. We've gone from, I'm talking about way before I was here, from number 10 to number 3, 2, or 1. But one of the things that tells you is you're becoming closer and closer to those companies. You've got the capabilities and the relationship, but the relationship itself is critical. And you'll see with the M&A, much more than other businesses, if the M&A bank goes to another bank, the business will sometimes follow. Whereas, financing business, it rarely follows.
Maybe I can ask a follow-up on that question, because M&As, acquisitions are an intriguing thing, right? And we know they have bad press. How many people in this room know that what happens to an acquirer's stock price when it buys? Typically go up or go down? It always goes down, right?
Ours went up.
So if that's true, how many acquisitions take place every year around the world? 5,000, 3,000, smaller number going down over time because we're learning that it's a bad thing to buy and it's only in those rare cases you make money?
That's good.
Try maybe 30,000, 35,000? Number going up? Does that mean I'm doing a really bad job as a teacher? And the moment you leave here, you should, the first time you go to work, where you work for Jamie, telling him he's doing a bad job by buying firms and it'll make even more value for his firm by not buying firms. That sound like the right advice for you to get?
So I was coming on, M&A deals, and when you look at companies, I think you should never say they work or they don't work,
right,
or deals work or don't work. The fact is, some people do them and they work fine, and some people do them and they're terrible. And that's true with just basic businesses. Walmart does exactly the same thing as Kmart. Exactly. One worked, one didn't. It wasn't the business. It was, Walmart did everything a little bit better. Vendor, purchasing, supplies, location, product, vendor, distribution plans. Everything a little bit better gave them this extra moat, this extra margin. Deals too. Now, there are three things in deals that are really critical. Okay, one is price, and they're all set. You kind of think of it as like a separate door. And after you get through each of the doors, then you can weigh and measure across the doors. One is price. So like in a financial business, some deals you can't pay a price, 6 times book for a bank and really make it work for your shareholder. The second is business logic, business strategy, business fit. And the third is the ability to execute. And by the way, I put the last one as the most important. So, if you can execute it and the business fit is great, you could pay a higher price. If it's kind of a little bit iffy and tough to execute, and you better have a lower price to give you a little bit of a margin of error. But the ability to execute is what people fail on. And it goes back to the same thing, that people often do a deal, and they know what they should do, but the second the deal gets done, the company gets bogged down in politics, bureaucracy, lack of decision-making. They don't form a management team. So if you read the press, one of the first things you should look at when people do a deal is not that they're out there saying we get along great, this is great, we're hugging. Did they announce the senior management team? So like at JPMorgan Chase, the senior management team was announced at the same time we announced the deal. We had already done the hard work. So the top 30 people were already announced. A lot of deals they're not, and now the deal is signed, and it gets bogged down, and you started making a lot of decisions that don't make sense, and like people don't convert systems, people don't do the hard work. They say they're going to cut overhead staff, which they should, by the way, not because they're cost cutting, and they don't because they get to phrase going to rock the company, and they fail to deliver on what they said they were going to deliver.
And then the follow-up.
But the other thing, by the way, it's got to work for the client. Just remember in these deals, it's not just for size. You have to be able to, eventually you have to be able to do something better, faster, quicker, cheaper for the client. If you can't do that, there's no sense to the deal. But that's what Walmart does. That's what, and don't just look at banks, pharmaceuticals, semiconductor, aircraft engines, and the size and scale and scope and economies of scale and the economies of software and engineering and brand and national advertising and sales forces, it ends up with a better product or cheaper price for a client. And so, I say if we don't do it, somebody else will. And I think banks are delivering more to clients for less.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then the follow-up to that is I want to think about in JPMorgan's role as an advisor rather than as an acquirer. How you carry out working with the clients you're advising for their acquisitions to go through all three of those doors, not just to stop at the price, but to work through looking for the value proposition and actually execute and carry it out.
So a great investment banker is someone that you actually trust their judgment.
Right.
And they aren't just rah, let's get the deal done and get paid a fee. They are, hey, they will do their own homework. They will have their own evaluation. They will help you do a due diligence, and they'll raise all the hard questions. And they'll help negotiate, but in the toughest negotiation, they may say, hey, at this point, if it doesn't make sense, we should walk. It's not the deal at any price. So really good advisors, because they know what? They know that they want your business for your life. It's not the deal. And so, some people do get carried away, and there's some investment bankers who are known for have certain phrases that they say Bruce Washington was bid him up, Bruce. Just get the deal done. Get the fee, go to the next deal. I'm not saying he does that, but that was the implication behind it. I think there was, and Wall Street did do that a little bit. So, if we want to build a great company, we've got to have the character to train our people to do the right thing for the client, not the right thing for JPMorgan Chase.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Question?
We understand that you worked with Sandy Wiles for a long time, and can you give us elaborate on what are the key takeaways when you learn from him, and when you select people to work with you, what are the key traits you're looking for?
Yeah, so, Sandy, wow. So, look, I worked for Sandy for 14 years. I didn't get along with him the last 5. I always thought it was going to get better. I obviously was wrong because I walked in one day and he fired me. I learned a tremendous amount from him. I also learned a tremendous amount of things I would never do. Okay, that I wouldn't treat people that way, and I wouldn't do things that way, and I wouldn't work with some of the people that had worked with him. I wouldn't work with. That was usually our biggest fights. It was over some of the people that he would put in a job or something that I just thought didn't have the character. And I do think this word character, but I do mean it. I think if you don't have a certain amount of character, you shouldn't have the job. So I say if you wouldn't want your kid working for the person, you shouldn't give the person the job. And we do allow people in these jobs. They're bullies. They're nasty. They're terrible. It's all about them. And yet they get promoted around the world. And I think you eventually destroy a company if you do something like that. So I learned a lot. I also learned some things I personally wouldn't do. What was your second part of your question? Was what?
Yeah, when you're looking for somebody to work with you, so what would you select?
Right. So I think there's some pretty basic stuff like a real work ethic. And a work ethic does not mean you have to destroy your life because you're working 7 days a week and neglecting your family. It basically means you do your work, you do your homework, you know what's going on, you meet your commitments. And it's not the dog ate my homework, and constant excuses and stuff like that. That you are honest, and I'm going to use this. It's not just honest; is you don't shave the truth. So I don't think, and a lot of people, they think it's okay that and you've seen people, they're kind of a little unctuous all the time. You can't quite nail it down, but you don't quite believe it. And a lot of people know that about them. And I can't afford that. Just say it. Say what you believe as best you can. You got to have people who can speak up, who will tell you what they think, whether or not you're going to like it. Because again, if you don't, you start getting more and more distorted. I think obviously people who are knowledgeable on their own, because very often, like people say, what's successful? People sometimes come to your office and they're an investment banker and they say, okay, Jamie, tell me about your company and the strategies and tell me about how we can help you. And I'm saying, what? Am I doing your job? I mean, they didn't even bother to read the annual report. They should do their own homework, study it. No facts, no information, no people. So you're looking for a broad breadth of people. We made a woman who was running investor relations. She was an investment banker. We put her in investor relations. She was made the CFO right from there, which is kind of a big step, with one person reporting to her of our commercial bank. And you know what? She got better. The bigger the job, the better she got. And you know what I realized? People trusted her. She delivered. Anyone who worked with her wanted her at the meeting because she was fun to be with. She would get right back to them. She said, I'll take care of that. And no one ever thought that she was going to be backstabbing them. And she became like this immediate kind of go-to core that, the people wanted to have as part of the team. And you realize how important those things are to. And she was obviously bright, but you realize how important those other skills are to social organizations, which is what a business is.
What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? Controllership, competition?
When we first did the deal, it was really two things. One was, believe it or not, was the systems complexity. I mean, we had thousands of applications. We still have hundreds of data centers. We're getting down to 29, and we had to consolidate all this stuff. And it's really hard work and nerve-wracking. And we've done 80% of it. The second thing I really worried about was a merger. It's kind of everything's going great, but then you quickly get bogged down and it becomes political, bureaucratic. You lose in touch. People they're kind of like lining up their troops. You get engaged in battle. The whole organization gets crippled, and it's like quicksand. We didn't have those. So now, I guess I would have to say that, what can go wrong in the global markets around the world? We have enormous exposures, and from credit, 132 billion of credit card loans, $50 billion of mortgage loans. I think the trading portfolios are, if you added them all together, including credit and loans around the world on and off balance sheet, $1 trillion. If you add it all together, I think the investment bank buys and sells, $1 trillion a day. We move $3 trillion of money a day around the world. And so you got to worry about those things, and you worry about the company doing something wrong and really hurting our reputation. And and you got to worry about all those things. And if you have good people in the jobs, good reporting, good disciplines, good controls, you minimize it, you still are taking the risk. Someone somewhere, maybe just something right now that is going to hurt this company, and and I do worry about that.
Just want to know, if one day you retire from the banking industry, what do you want to do most?
If I retire from the banking industry, I was very fortunate semi-fortunate, because I got fired. And I had this year where I didn't work. And I read books, and I traveled, and I got in great shape, and I did some boxing, and I did, and first of all, I realized one thing. You know what I really missed? I missed the game. I missed the camaraderie. I missed the fight. I missed the worrying, even though, usually I don't miss it that much sometimes. But, and so I like the size and scope, and it kind of keeps me up going. But I also realized when I lost my job that it wasn't, I was staying the same person I was. I was okay, and most of the people, my friends, were still my friends afterwards. And and one day I know I'm not going to be doing this job, but I will have prepared for something like that. So I may want to buy a small business. I'm not going to stop working. I'm not going to go to retire in Florida. I may buy a small business. I may invest. I'm not going to run the small business. But maybe have some people run it you really like, and help them do the best job that they can. I have taken up guitar lessons recently, because I do have 3 daughters, 21, 19, and 17. One is right here. But I'm kind of mentally getting prepared when they're not there anymore, because I have a senior in college. And, like, what am I going to do on the weekends when I can't play with my playthings? And so I took up guitar, and, I do need a few more hobbies. So,
One more
I love history and reading and stuff like that, too.
Time for one more question. Right there.
Yeah, on the front page of the discussion, you mentioned that Mr. William Harrison, the chairman of JPMorgan, will retire at the end, and you will succeed as the chairman of JPMorgan. So what's your expectation on your responsibility?
What's my what? My expectation of being chairman? Nothing will change. It's a title, and Bill is still a friend. Bill will help advise the company, but the formal chairman job is running the board meeting, and I pretty much, as CEO, ran 75% of it anyway, because half of it's talking about more than 75 is talking about the actual businesses. So I think it's just a natural progression. I should say, and Bill would agree with me, by the way, that it goes back to this thing about either or, and people always try to simplify life. There is no better governance because you have a chairman and a CEO separate. That is not what makes better governance. In fact, you've seen several examples of governance where they were separate and it was a disaster. Are you open with the board? Do people, have an active debate? Do you talk about your real risks? Do you have the people around the table, do we give them full information? And that doesn't happen because you have a chairman and CEO. Very often, having 2 separate people is they both manipulate a board. For example, Enron had a chairman separate from the CEO. I just think it's better to have one person running the company, everyone knows what direction you're going in, and the board should have an active and open conversation all the time about the business and focus on strategy, key risks, kind of your operating plan, and make sure all those things are done right and done properly.
Let me ask one follow-up. And Scott, when you introduced Jamie, you mentioned that you work with several nonprofit organizations. And I guess my question is whether folks in this room, me, others, should wait till we're CEO before we take on those sorts of activities, or whether they play a role earlier on in your career in actually contributing to your career. Yeah,
I think everyone should do something. First of all, let me say, I've always, you may not remember Dunlap, the guy who basically said, business is business and not charity, we shouldn't give money away. And I completely disagreed at the time. I told him when I saw him at some cocktail party somewhere, you're dead wrong. If you just take a candy store in a town, that candy store will give a summer job to someone, not because they necessarily need the job, but they'll repaint the place. That's how we teach our kids, young kids, how to work. They'll get the ice off the front because they don't want someone breaking their leg. They'll help the Little League team or the local church or the local homeless or something because they're part of the community. And we're all part of a community. All we are is part of a community at 100,000 touch points. And most of our senior executives serve on boards and get help from the company, so it's kind of their sweat equity and sometimes our money and stuff like that. And I think it's critical. We signed the Equated Principles. I think it's, it's great if we have a better environment. The better the environment, the health of the world, the better it is for us. Humanity is far more important to me than JPMorgan Chase. So I wouldn't even put them on the same planet. And my family would be up there too. JPMorgan Chase is a business. And while I fight for it, I spend 90 hours a day, if you ask me, I want to do what's right for the country and our planet more than that. And the best I can do is make sure this institution produces and helps and is productive and makes it a better world. And I think is the best I can do. I also want to say that you see corporate America getting kicked around in the press all the time. And so I want to give you a slightly different perspective. We are a fabulous institution that way. We give away $100 million a year. Okay, $100 million a year. And I have asked Bud to make sure we give it away more effectively. I think a lot of corporations give it away. I want to make sure it's used wisely. Okay, is it used fairly? And is it used for things that really need help? Because I think a lot of charitable giving is for every dollar you put in, it's got 20 cents effectiveness. People don't pay attention. It's not administered well. You're doing things that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. We help the blind. So, for example, we have developed speaking ATMs, which have been installed in Chicago and a couple other schools, where you put on a headphone and the machine will talk to you privately. We give the blind jobs. We help the disabled, both giving them jobs and giving them access. We help welfare mothers get back to work. We help inner city school kids. Okay, if you are a reservist in the military and you were called to duty, we pay your salary while you're at duty, because we don't want to add financial hardship to the great personal hardship you're making, whether or not you're in favor of the Iraq War. And so we do a lot of great stuff. I try to remind some of our folks, I think we do more than the average citizen, the average middle market business, the average small business, and certainly more than the average congressman. and yet we get treated sometimes like we are the devil incarnate, and we're not. And our people give of themselves. So it isn't. Now, I do think, you have these big institutions, and the governments look at them, and the people, the people who vote and say, hey, you do very well by us. We're going to put restrictions on you. I understand that. So corporations exist because the laws allow it, and so we can't just say, hey, it's a complete free market. It's not. I mean, there are a lot of regulations and rules wherever we operate, and by the way, we do these good things around the world. When that tsunami hit, $5 million. The Pakistani earthquake, $2 million. And not just money, we do a lot of other things. When Katrina, $10 million. And so we're trying to be a great corporate citizen and get fully engaged in those things, which I know a lot of you care about. And if you join JPMorgan Chase, we have a lot of ways you can get involved with your own time and your own effort.